Hello and welcome to Season 4 of the Sunday Podcast, presented by sportsshoes.com. I'm Ollie Lum.
And I'm Matt Seddon.
This podcast is all about elite distance running in the UK.
We're here to give you all the latest news updates around the sport,
as well as weekly interviews with athletes and coaches.
Stay up to date by following us on Instagram and X at Sunday Podcast.
And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel too, where we post athlete workout videos, shoe reviews and more.
Thanks for listening, and as always, we hope you enjoy the episode.
Oh boy, here we go. That's probably the first night of, I guess we did have the 10K, but that is the first night that I was kind of absolutely blown away. You know, we've just watched the men's 100. Noah Lyles took the win. Matt and I, after sprint, even before that, neither of us are big fans, are we? To be honest, mate, we're kind of rooting for some of the underdogs, I guess. But mate, what a run by Lyles just then.
Calm down, mate. I mean, no, honestly, that was such a close race. I'm just like, I think it's so harsh. I mean, in swimming, they don't go to the thousandths of a second. We do in running, like obviously got the same time, mate. I'm so close. I think his chest had it and stuff, but it's just it was a bit sus on the line for me. But yeah, I guess he's Olympic champion fair and square. Yeah, I would have rather. I mean, I was hoping Curly won, to be fair. I saw Curly.
Same, yeah.
I was cheering for Curly, and he got a good start as well. And I was like, oh, he's got good speed. But mate, I just think the rest of them choked. They just choked big time, man. Like, I think thing is, Lyles, he's just been there so many times before, hasn't he? Like on the big stage and like winning under pressure. Whereas like these guys, like it's the same old story, mate. Look, like Chill in their semi running 9.80, and then they run 9.79, like a fraction quicker. And like he's tensing up, like I wouldn't say he's panicking, but yeah, Thompson, like I just think he lost that race by tensing up, mate. We're no sprint experts, but there's our verdict. But yeah, no, it was a good race. I mean, geez, I felt like they held them on the line for so long.
They did.
If they're gonna do that for every final, no thank you.
Yeah, I think the men's 100 is a bit different, isn't it? They like building that up.
DJ set finish before they started. That's what it seemed like. It seemed like they had these like songs queued and they wouldn't start the race until they were over.
Yeah, which I'm sure that affected a lot of people, you know. I was a bit concerned about. I was thinking, I think Lyles he's gone too hyped too early. But maybe he had enough time to actually settle down because of how long they held him. But yeah, I did enjoy that. Obviously men's 100 is always a big one. And it feels like kind of not that the Olympics hadn't started, but it feels like it's well and truly kicked off now. Now we've seen kind of a men's 100-meter crown, you know, men's and women's, obviously, last night as well. So,
yeah, both of those gone down. I mean, I think there'll be way better moments in this champs, man. I mean, like we might be biased here, but I just think like everyone's looking forward to that men's 1500, like the men's 1500, the women's 800. I mean, should we just start with 800 because that was first, right? I honestly, I saw that. I was, oh my God, Keely just destroyed it. She looks so comfortable. I think she could run 153 in the final. I think my only concern is obviously being out there on your own. But hey, look, I'm going to be there tomorrow night. The last Olympic final I watched, 800 final, I watched Rudisha ran the world record. So maybe it'll be the same for Keely. But boy, yeah, she just looked good. And I'm looking at Mora, Daguma, probably her biggest challenges. Sekadizo, who was in a semi, but they just don't look convincing. But I don't know this is the thing. Like, what do you think Keely's going to do? Is she going to race to win, or is she going to race to destroy the field and hunt the clock? Because I think she wins if she hunts the clock and destroys the field. Like if she runs it like Rudisha, like if she like the way she ran it today as well, like just a little bit quicker through the first lap, maybe in the final, and then just continue to apply the pressure like she does. She's very good at running even splits and stuff. If she backs herself enough to do that, I think she wins because I don't think Mary Moore, Daguma, they haven't got much more than a 156 in them, to be honest. But if she like plays it tactical, then I just think, oh God, you're opening the door. Like anything can happen. Like I still think she's so much better than the rest, but that's when I would get a bit nervous.
I think that's it, mate. I think because she is so much better in terms of time, she has the luxury of being able to front run and not. I don't think she has to run 153. Um, I think you can go for it, and even if you kind of blow up a little bit, I think that's still enough. Whereas, like you say, if she kind of chills in there, look, don't get me wrong, I still think she's favourite even if she sits in. But I think you're right, mate. I think her best shot, and I think just from some of her interviews, kind of how she spoke after the race in her post race interview, I think she's hinting that she's going to run a quick time. She's going to try and run really quick and put on a show. Like, I'm not being funny. 3 years ago, silver medal.
Mhm.
Obviously, like, it is an upgrade to get gold, but I think how her career has progressed, she wants more than just one step up from that. Like you say, she wants to absolutely blow the field away.
Yeah, her mindset seems to be there. Post-race interviews, like you said, things we've heard from the camp, like her mindset, her attitude seems to be in that place as well. Like but she seems so excited to run this final. And I think obviously all athletes are excited, but I think a lot of athletes are excited with anxiety, and
Mhm.
I'm not seeing that much from her. And I think the reason she's so excited is because she knows what she's got in the locker, mate. And I just think she's going to do something filth. Um, if she
I
runs
even
it.
just think, I even just think the way she kind of kicked on with 30 to go, and then like finished and sort of smiled, looked at the clock and was like, okay, I just ran 156. I put in a little burst at the end after I sort of shut it down,
Yeah,
and it still felt so easy. I think she was almost checking
yeah.
how she's feeling, and then
She
kind of
really
was like,
shut it down.
yeah. It almost looked like her facial expression. It was like she just finished a rep. You know, when you finish a rep that's not like eyeballs out, and you finish it, you see the split, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm ready to go.
Mhm.
Rather than I've just finished a race here. Like, I'm not being funny. Obviously, she's gonna make the final, but it's never like for any athlete normally, especially the 800. It's not a kind of conclusion. We'll get on to Riki in a minute. Like it's not an easy thing to make an Olympic final, no matter who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, she shut it down so much and she still ran 156 high. And I was like, "Oof, okay. Like, if she'd just kept the same speed that last 30, she's 156 low. And then, yeah, and yeah, I mean, it's going to be special. Like, the stadium is just electric. Like, the crowd are amazing. I think the track's fast. Like, um, the 10K was fast at least,
Mm.
So, I know the sprints
Fast
have.
enough.
Yeah, yeah,
It's always
exactly.
fun.
Defo. The weather seems to be amazing every night that we've had. Like I think there was like a 0.0 meter per second wind when the eights and the 15s were taking place. I know for the 100 final it was a +1, but yeah, very very short performance by Keely. And then I think maybe let's move on to Gil because I thought Gil for a 17-year-old raced really really well, and I think not that you want to critique, but I just think if she just backed herself a little bit more. I
Yeah,
actually think she would have qualified. I mean, she's just missed out as a fastest loser anyway. And like there was a period in that race, was it down the back straight? I just thought just back yourself, girl.
yeah.
Just
Just
go for it.
go, just go.
Even actually on the home straight, coming around to the bell, like I just thought she ran so wide, like the whole race. And then on the top, like to run the whole race in like lane two, and then on the top bend to be kind of stuck there as well. It's like that's tough, man. But honestly, yeah, I thought on the back straight, had she just committed and just thought, sod this, let's see what happens. I think she qualifies. But look,
Yeah,
hindsight's a good thing. I think for a 17-year-old, actually, like she was really, really strong. And I just think like from here, I think she's now, I don't know, we don't know what she's thinking. We don't know her at all. But I would hope she goes back to the camp and is just like, "Do you know what? That wasn't so bad. Like and she'll probably watch it back and be like, I'm better than these girls. I think she
yeah.
might.
I think I was almost pleased. I get what you're saying about the kind of running wide. I was pleased she didn't kind of get stuck and boxed in though, because I think
Yeah,
that was the mistake I thought she might make, was actually just letting herself get boxed
she
in. But
does
I
have,
think you're
yeah.
bang on, mate. I think she, like, if you're gonna make that decision to be wide, you need to make a move at some point, because you put yourself there so that you can. Like that, you're kind of you're making the, I guess you're paying the price for going wide so that at some point you can be decisive,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and you
And I
haven't got
just
to,
don't think,
yeah,
yeah. So she didn't actually get like she kind of invested in going wide, but didn't like cash in, kind of making the move like she could have. But not being funny, like you said, 17 years old, she doesn't know yet what is going to be her best way to run a race, like in the same way 3 years ago, Keely wasn't kind of the front runner she is now. I can say the front runner she is now. She wasn't kind of the complete athlete she is now, but she didn't know exactly the right way to run it. Obviously, she went better than Gilded, but obviously a couple of years older. I just think give her a few more years racing on the circuit. Like how many 800s of a world class level has Phoebe Gill actually lined up in her life?
Two. And for me, that was the heat.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
So
Like, she won British champs comfortably. And yeah, I mean, we'll get onto Riki because almost like a similar thing. Like she did exactly. Riki ran a carbon copy. I mean, she was even racing the same person who edged her out at the World Indoors. Um, and like Daguma and she ran wide that whole race. At British Champs, she did the same. She ran in lane two, like on the shoulder of Phoebe Gill, pretty much the whole way. And Phoebe Gill just pulled away on the home straight. Daguma did it at World Indoors. Obviously, the London Diamond League, Keely hugged the inside the whole way, but mate, again, like why? Like she just ran wide the whole way, and like you literally hit the nail on the head there, mate. Like if you're running wide, it's so you attack the race at some point,
yeah,
but she doesn't, and
not just stay there. Yeah.
yeah. And like I was like on the back straight, you just got to go. And like obviously, like they are trying, like they are, they're pretty much redlining. They're absolutely maxed out. Like it's so easy for us to sit here and say that, but I'm just like, it didn't look like at any point she was trying to make a move to go to the front that was
Mm,
decisive to kind of cut the Goomer off, get to the front, heading into that final bend and stuff like that. And like she's proven she is one of the best in the world at the 800, and like. Yeah, I just think you've got to have way more confidence in yourself going into these sorts of races. And like this is why Kerr's so good. This is why Jakob's so good. This is why Keely's so good. Like, yes, they're super fit. Yes, we sit there and we say, they're the fastest on paper, but mentally, they also carry themselves the best out of everyone. And I don't know if that's just
yeah.
because they're documented more, and they're in the media more and stuff, but all these athletes are so headstrong. And so it was unfortunate for Keely, and like, we don't
For
want to
Riki,
critique
yeah.
too much. Sorry for Riki, we don't want to critique too much, but I mean, I think she'll be.
No, no, it's not. It's not so much a critique. It's just a real shame, isn't it? And I think we kind of went into these thinking we could if we do really well as a nation, we could get three in the final. But obviously Phoebe Gill is kind of it's a bit of an unknown. But I think a lot of people would have said for sure we're going to see Riki and Keely in the final. I just like you said, mate, it's kind of reminiscent of some Riki performances we've seen before. I think when it is when she has to kick in a home straight, Riki really struggles. I
But
think
it's because she
obviously,
runs 814 meters, mate.
mm,
Like 7 meters a lap, dude. And like she literally ran, on that outside of basically she ran on the line of lane two, like pretty much the whole way. And I'm just like, how are you giving these girls that much respect and room? And like,
yeah,
and the girls who came by her on the home straight, like they'd been like pushing and shoving, they'd had to make moves, like, and they still managed to rally on the home straight. It's just like it was a shame. And I just think when you've got wheels of 155, you've got so
yeah,
much speed. Like you just got to get after it, man. In an 800, I think it's easy to overthink, but we've said time and time again, like if you're confident enough, it's probably one of the easiest races to front run. Um, because everyone
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and you've got to think those behind often don't have a clear run. Like though basically
yeah,
anyone from like third to eighth is scrapping. Like they're having to run wide at some point. Like and the weather's good in an 800. It's like when Giles was running world records indoors and stuff. It's like you can just set like a fast pace and just hold it because nothing's breaking your rhythm. And these athletes and this is something I think Keely, I mean, from what I've heard, the way she trains is she does a lot of race pace stuff. Like she's always
Mm.
running race pace and she does a lot of race predictor sessions. Hence why Trevor had the confidence to sort of come out and say, he thinks she'll run 153 this year or next year, in that kind of time frame. And so like when you know your pace so well as an 800 runner, like you could do what Keely does.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're bang on, mate. That's the key, isn't it? It's work at race pace. But obviously, yeah, a shame for Riki. Let's hope she bounces back from this one. Because yeah, I think she's definitely going to be disappointed with that. But that's the sport, isn't it? That's the sport. It always spits some people out. So on to the 1500, an event we've seen kind of a lot of people being spat out over the past few days. But as we kind of suggested yesterday, that first semi final was really strong, wasn't it? With Jakob, Kerr, and Hocker taking the top three positions, all three of them looking supreme. Um, and what I loved as well was just Jakob looking over at Kerr to see if he was looking at him. Kerr just looking straight ahead, down that home straight.
Yeah, yeah. It's always going to be a bit drama. I mean, I don't know about you, but I took a lot away. I mean, I picked it up when Krammy started saying about this could be, this is weak from Jakob. Like, he was saying, maybe showing some nerves here because he's taking the race up. If he had confidence, like if he had a little bit more confidence and backed himself, he could get top six whichever way he wants. Started saying it might be a rerun for the final. Got me thinking, my brain's spiraling. The way Jakob ran this was interesting for me because this was not a Jakob of the last few years where he's just run 55s, 56s like
Mm,
that, dead even, and just basically come with me and you're gonna fatigue. Do you know what I mean? I'm gonna be the one who can hold this pace consistently for the longest. And that's kind of how we've seen him, right? He got quicker. Obviously, the first 300 was first 350, very slow. What was it, 61 first lap or whatever? When he hit the front about 350 in, coming up to the 400 mark. And then he's run a 56 low, he's run a 55 0, and he's run a 53. He's got quicker and quicker and quicker each lap. Now, hear me out. In the final, if he does that, this is El Garouche style, what, back in, was it '04?
mm.
If you do get quicker and quicker each lap, you make it so much harder for Kerr to come round you. Whereas when you're running dead even 55, 56s, Kerr just has to surge a little bit, come round you. But on that third lap, if Jakob's running 54, let's say he's squeezing it a bit more in the final. If he's running 54 for that third lap, Kerr's going to have to run 54 lows. Like, and that is going to sap him. And then on top of that, if Kerr waits even longer and Jakob runs 54 mids or whatever, and then he goes and runs a 53 low last lap, Kerr has to run a 52 high last lap. And look, a lot of people say like he's probably capable of it, like he might be able to do that. But I'm just saying, if it is a similar kind of the race plays out similar to that semi-final, but Jakob just obviously squeezes it a bit more because it's the final, I think you make it very, very difficult for people to come around. Coupled with the fact getting faster and faster each lap is a very, very difficult skill. To get faster on the last lap, not so bad. To get faster the last 600, not so bad. But to go from 1200 each lap getting like a second and a half quicker, that really does eliminate people's kick.
Mm.
So Cocker, by the way, poof, yeah, my pick before. Look, I'm confident he's going to get a medal, I think. And if things go wrong for either Jakob or Kerr, because they're going head to head, he might pick up the pieces. But that's my take. I mean, I think the final might play out like that. I think Jakob is going to win the 1500 final after seeing those semis. But yeah, I mean, I'm just putting myself on the line, to be honest. I mean, obviously, it's a pretty much 50-50, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, mate. And in the same way I've said, I think it will be Kerr. Like, but I'm not going to be surprised if Jakob wins. And I think we're both the same on that one. All we know is it's going to be a fascinating race. I just can't wait for it, mate. It's going to be top draw. So that's on Tuesday. I'm sure everyone will be tuning in for that. Gawley in the final as well. Made it through from the other semi final. Unfortunately, Mills got knocked out. And this is the thing with these repechage rounds. Like, it's a tall enough task to make a final, let alone when you've had to run It's your third 1500 in 3
Not
days.
gonna lie. His eyes on the start line. Poor guy had looked like he'd slept a wink.
Yeah, it's
This is the thing.
yeah,
Uh,
it's not good.
how long is the repechage going to stick around? Because everyone who did the repechage was cooked, basically.
Yeah,
You know, those guys were.
even those guys that we consider like we're kind of like in quotation marks your top guys, right? The ones who I guess the only real reason is so that say a Jakob Ryad fell and then he could get through. Maybe Jakob and Kirk were the only people who could then.
I think
They'd have been absolutely fine. But apart from them, like obviously we saw Ollie Hoare, like he came out on Instagram today, and kind of said he's been struggling with some people like kind of messaging him and things like that, and it did affect his race after performing badly. But like people like himself, McSwain didn't get through on a second chance either. It's it's tough, and
You
I
got the
think
guys. You got the guys who didn't get through on a second
yeah,
chance. Then you got the guys like Mills who have had to now do 3 races in 3 days.
yeah,
And yeah, I just think athletes one, they certainly don't train like that. You know, like you can say, oh, I do double threshold, but you know, threshold sessions are much more manageable than flipping flat out 1500 races. Like no one trains, you know, 3 hard days back to back from what we know.
mm.
And like
Unless it was the champs, unless the champs was designed to be, heat semi-final three
unless
days
the
in a
champs
row,
are
then
back.
you would train for it. But like no one's
Yeah.
training for the repechage.
No,
I
no,
wouldn't
no,
think.
no.
Maybe in the future people will have to, you
But
know.
what I'm saying as well is athletes go through so much. Like you think about all the process they have to do to like get themselves ready to race. You know,
Yeah.
2 hours before they're checking in, they're stretching, then they go on for a warm up, and then they take caffeine and bicarb, and you just think, can't like off the back of that race, you then have to cool down. Like it's like a 4 or 5 hours stressful window, and then to do that 3 days back to back. It's just super difficult. I think, like you said, the only guys who maybe could have come through the repechage and gone on to qualify for the final is people like Jakob, Kerr, and
Yeah.
maybe Hocker. But
Look, and we saw it. We saw it in 110-meter hurdles this morning, right? American Freddie Crittenton got a PB of 12.93. He ran 18.27. And he said in his interview afterwards, I've been nursing a tweak, so I wanted to use the repechage round to give my body more rest. So he's walked essentially
already playing the system.
the 110 hurdles so that he can race tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow to kind of nurse his tweak. And he'll be racing against guys who are tired. But that's a hurdles race. I actually think maybe I'm wrong. Again, we're not experts on the sprints, but I don't think the other 110 hurdles guys, right, are going to be as cooked in tomorrow in the repechage, for example. Whereas in a 1500, if you've jogged around in 5 minutes and everyone else is around 3:35, you are definitely kind of less fatigued than them.
Yeah, not only that, like if you knew you were going to do that,
Yeah,
far-fetched. But
you
if you
don't.
knew
I
you
wouldn't even warm up. I'd
wouldn't
wear my
warm up,
trainers.
yeah,
Like,
you literally would. And so, yeah, and maybe it is, but yeah, like we said, I could never see that happening. To be honest with you,
well, it's just happened.
no,
That's
it's
what I'm
happening
saying.
in hurdles, but I couldn't see it happening in a distance race. But I just don't think it will stick around. I don't think. I thought they originally started to give people, a little bit more screen time, whatever. Like, I don't think athletes give a fuck. I don't think brands
Yeah.
give a fuck either, to be honest with you, for that matter. To get their sponsor out there. I mean, they're all in their country's colors anyway. Like, no one even knows who they're sponsored by.
Mm.
But yeah, anyway, man, that was semi-final one. I mean, it was pretty impressive. We got to just mention actually, we'll credit Sesman for this because he let us know of a pretty crazy stat. Um, Nielsen, the Dutch guy, Stefan Nielsen, qualified for the 1500-meter final, Olympic final. He qualified by right. He was fifth in that semi-final one, a stacked semi-final one, by the way. 3:32, ran a lifetime best as well. This man was 42nd ranked in the world coming into this. He was 10 spots outside the time qualifiers as well. So he
Mm.
hadn't even run the standard. And this is basically a showcase to BA to say, this whole you have to be inside the time qualifiers, you have to be a top 15, a top 8 contender on paper before the champs is just absolute bullshit. I mean, we know it, to be fair. I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm sure all our listeners are on board as well.
Yeah.
But I just thought, this Tesman sent this in this evening and it was a great stat. And it kind of showcases and even when you look at someone like Meslick as well, like, he was on world ranking and he's made the semi-final and stuff. Like anything can happen, especially in the short and middle distance races. I kind of in like the 5,000 and the 10,000, you are like, okay, like if you're 27, if you're running 27:10, let's say 27:05, and this guy's running 26:30, like probably not gonna,
Yeah,
break into
but I
the
don't. But the thing is, for me, they're not the issue because the 10, well, on a men's side anyway, the 10 and the 5, you're not getting invites unless you're in those run those times anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true actually. Yeah, I mean
Like
you have
because to be in those spots, you would have had to run that quick.
yeah.
So it's not really an issue. It always balance the rankings always balance itself out because if no one's run that quick that year, then you would be in a ranking spot probably if you've run closer to the time. For example, like
Yeah.
they always work because it's based off everyone else and how quick everyone's run. Obviously, the meets come into it, position comes into it, but largely it's down to how quick people run in good meets.
Yeah. It's
So
it's even someone like Pietro Arese as well, who finished sixth, he's made the final. Like he's not, you know, he's not like a guy who you would put in top 8 in the world. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, he is a European medalist, mind you, actually. So maybe I'm being a bit daft here, but yeah, man. I mean, anyway, so that was semi-final one. We've highlighted obviously the selection policy is poor. And in semi-final two, mate, I've got to give credit to Nagoose. Like we do give him a hard time sometimes. But yeah, I mean, he kind of dominated start to finish, and like I think this is why sometimes I think it's easy to get frustrated with Nagoose because again, like we were just saying, how like potentially Gil and Riki could they've just backed themselves a little bit more. Very easy for us to sit here and say that, but Nagoose, he backed himself, and he'll go into this final now with a shed load of confidence coming off of that heat.
yeah, and I think the good thing for Nagoose is he had to do it today in the semi. He knows Jakob's going to do it for him in the final, so he doesn't have to make it that quick. But he played to his strengths. Like for me, like being tactically a good racer doesn't mean being able to run slow and then have a kick. It means ensuring that the race plays to your strengths. So if it is slow and you're not a guy who has a kick, you need to do something about it. It's not always, I think, where some people get confused and they're like, oh, basically, you're only a good championship racer if you have a good kick. It's not the case. You just need to make sure the race suits you.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. So
Yeah, he did.
he's
He
not he's
did,
not he's not changed his fitness or his shape. He's just ensured that actually he's realised, okay, maybe he's learned from the mistakes of some of his teammates. He's realised actually, what are my strengths? Well, I know I can just front run that. I can do laps and laps
Yeah,
for
I think
days on my own. So he's
I
gone
think
and
the
done it.
1500, there has been a confusion in recent years of like who actually has a good kick because
Mm,
when the race is 3:29, I'd argue that no one's really kicking. You're just hanging on the longest and you're just
yeah,
stronger than the others. Like you're just basically a faster 1500 runner. Like, and even when the race is like 3:30, it's kind of a similar thing. Like that to run 3:30, these guys run it pretty even, kind of 57s, and then Nagoose, to be fair, just kind of worked down. And obviously they finished with a slightly quicker last lap, but not by much. Um, and so yeah, so when you look at someone like Gawley and you think like if this was like a Centro Rio 2016 Olympics, that's who's got the best kick.
mm,
That is who can close the fastest. Like, and so I do feel like yeah, kicks have been a little bit confused over recent years. But mate, on Gawley as well. By the way, Nagoose looked good. Kessler looked good as well. I thought this was a much weaker heat. I mean, you did have people like Nordas, and you could say he got third at the Worlds last year, but he hasn't been that athlete this season. Full stop.
no, no,
Chariot, although he ran quick in Monaco, he hasn't been the Chariot that he was in 2019 and before that. So especially when he's come up against like decent opposition. So it was a slightly weaker heat, I think, but Gawley, yeah, handled it well and just didn't put a foot wrong, positioned himself and just job done, man. I think Gawley comes, I want to say top five tomorrow.
Mate, I really hope Gawley can like kind of maximize this opportunity now because he is someone that he's always, yeah, he is so good on his day.
Yeah.
And if he gets a shot, gets a sniff, who knows, man? Who knows?
This is it,
Uh,
man. Who's coming top five in this race? You know, when you look at
well,
it,
apart
yes,
from those three, like we're talking about those three, we're
Jakob,
saying,
Hocker, maybe Nagoose.
yeah,
But then after that,
nah, not even the goose, mate. Like those three for me are look, even Hocker, right? The two are a cutting above the rest, right? I mean, pretty much anyone else can get bronze. I think Hocker will, but who knows, mate? Because Hocker races for the win, then you open yourself up. Like 1,500 meter running, normally anyone can win, but this time, yeah, we've got two athletes who are head and shoulders above everyone else. It's a two-horse race for gold, and then obviously one of them gets the silver, or yeah, maybe they cook themselves. But I think anyone can win a bronze medal. I don't think there's anyone else in that race who like is nailed on. I think yeah, if you said to me you have to pick three, you say Hocker, but Hocker's not nailed on.
I think he's nailed on for something bigger, mate. But nah, yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I'm just excited to see the guy. I mean, God, he's a beast, mate. He's an absolute beast. And I think, LA 2028, oof, God, maybe Jakob's doing the 10K by then. I doubt it. But yeah. Right, mate. That's men's 1500. Obviously, we're going to look forward to the final. We cannot wait. I mentioned before, I'm going to be in Paris tomorrow. I'll watch the women's 800 final, women's 5K final. Steeple heats as well. Men's steeple heats, are looking forward to them. And then flying back Tuesday. I just pray to the Lord I land in time to watch that men's 1500 final. I think I'm just going to turn my phone off all evening on Tuesday, all afternoon, just in case. But yeah, and then obviously on the topic of steeple heats, mate, we had the women's heats and Lizzie Bird ran very, very well. I mean, Jesus, fine margins. I think that was close in the 100 final to sneak into the final there. But yeah, she's someone I'm just really excited. I think could have a stab at that British record. Depends, how fast it goes. I think there's obviously, I mean, I'm stating the obvious here, but there's more depth than ever has been in the women's steeple. Like you go into that
Mm.
final, if it's an 8:55 night, well, let's say they run a 2:58, 2:59, 3 minute first K, the whole field is there. And I think even 3 years ago, it would, they're all strung out over the track because you've got a lot of women sort of
Yeah,
running like 9:15 and stuff. Whereas now, if the race is, the big guns take it out, kind of they semi took it out in the heats. I think she's on for a British record, mate. She looks strong. Obviously, she's got so much confidence off the Europeans. And there's going to be so many people to latch onto. Like you can't ask for a better race. So looking forward to her
yeah.
final.
Exciting to see. She's been super impressive over the last few years. Obviously had the injury last year, so great to see her back and looking forward to see what she can do in the final. Amy Pratt unfortunately didn't advance through, but yeah, someone we haven't seen much of, so we weren't really sure how she'd go anyway. But obviously great to be out there competing, of course. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up kind of the news for today. We do also on this episode have a kind of little guest feature for you, which should hopefully help preview some of the upcoming races, right, Matt?
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, we spoke to the wonderful George Mallett. I mean, he goes into detail, who he is, what he does. But effectively, he's a freelance journalist and does a lot of work for, goes out to Kenya a lot and sort of documents NN runners. And you've probably all read his work at some point, what does a bit of work with World Athletics and stuff like that as well. And so it was really cool to get him on to give us an insight because obviously, look, today, those marathons would have been wrapped up to give us an insight into Kipchoge, that camp. George has spent a lot of time with them, but also not just Kipchoge, Patrick Sang. Who is this guy? How does he operate? Faith Kipyegon is going to try and pull off the 1500 5K double. Kanasan stop her. She's NN as well. So, we basically just got someone who knows more than us about these, about the kind of East Africans, I guess, who run for NN. So yeah, it was a really good episode. So yeah, enjoy that to kind of give a bit more of a background. But before we kind of move on from that, mate, I mean, women's 5,000, should we have a stab who wins tomorrow? I mean, I think we both put Kipyegon on the predictions, didn't we? To destroy it.
Yeah, we have, mate, and I think that's obviously you guys were about to listen to George, but yeah, I think he said similar, mate, and we've been talking about this, haven't we, Matt? That whilst the 1500's her event, when it comes to a championship, we almost think the 5 is the one where it's even more of a foregone conclusion already.
Yeah, just the way she can kick. And it's fascinating listening to George kind of tell us how Kipyegon trains, how even people like Kenya Mao train,
Mm,
who are in the group as well. You know, Sang coaches 800 runners up to the marathon. And yeah, endurance is a massive part of the program. So yeah, I'm going to back Kipyegon as well, mate. I can't see it getting beat. I think Grobdian and Battlecletti have a great chance of kind of getting up there as well. The Americans, I mean, Cranny and you have Morgan as well, didn't they? Schweitzer, like, funnily enough, I was watching a replay of the 2020 when Hassan won it. Um, and like just like how strong they were, you know, Cranny and Schweitzer then, like they really were in their
mm,
prime. Like Bama Track Club was in its prime in 2021. Like
yeah.
it really was. But yeah, all I'm saying is like I think they'll do well to kind of hang on to this group depending what race it is.
Yeah, I think so, mate. It's like any group, though, isn't it? Like, I don't no group's ever at the top forever.
Yeah, it's
BTC had
true.
their time. Um, yeah, we still have NOP. I guess even NN to an extent. It kind of comes in waves, doesn't it? But yeah, really looking forward to those races, and we'll obviously bring you a review pod for those as well. Matt will obviously be coming at it live, so you can tell us about the stadium action as well, mate.
I can indeed, man. I mean, just debating whether to fork out. I think, by the way, if anyone's listening, you could still buy tickets for that men's 1500 final, €385 for a decent seat as well, because the cheap ones are gone. But, you know, for a chance of history, you'll remember it for the rest of your life. I've been contemplating it myself. Yeah, see how I go on. The unfortunate thing is, fingers crossed, just got a mortgage, so life's hitting me hard at the moment. So these sort of reckless moves that I used to do, not so common.
Yeah, mate, you're an absolute menace when it comes to athletics tickets. I remember Doha. It was like 2 days before. You're like, I'm flying tomorrow. Do you want to come? I was like, no.
Yeah, geez, Doha 2019. I must have spent a good, yeah, several £100s flying out there on a
But
whim.
but anyway, we'll let you guys listen to George. But thanks very much for listening to us. And we'll catch you tomorrow. Okay, firstly, George, just welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on, mate.
Yeah, nice to speak to both of you.
Good stuff. Good stuff. We were just kind of chatting off air about kind of your role with the NN running team and global sport communication. Do you mind just kind of telling our listeners what actually your kind of official job title and all that stuff is?
Yeah, so it's probably worth saying I don't work for NN. I'm a freelance journalist who does a lot of work with Global Sports Communication, which is the agency which manages the NN team. So Global Sports are a bit wider. They've got like team members that aren't necessarily part of NN, which could be, for example, like Sifan Hassan, Joshua Cheptegei. They're just like a big global agency that has a lot of athletes in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda, as well as the Netherlands, where they're all from. So I basically just write for them. That's kind of my passion, is that I like writing long form journalism about athletics, and that's basically exclusively what I do for them. And then sort of press releases. So through that, I kind of go out there occasionally and have a little brief window into what they do, especially in Kenya, and Patrick Sang's group out in Kaptagat. So yeah, that's kind of my role.
For those listening, That's exactly why we've got you on. Because you're a man in the know. Like I say, really, really good journalist as well. Really good articles that I've had the pleasure of reading many times. So I mean, Olympics is underway, but just before we kind of talk about the Olympics, how did it all come about? Just in case there's someone out there who kind of wants to get into journalism, because you've almost got the dream job if you're an athletics fan or a distance running fan specifically. I mean, this is your dream job, no?
Well, yeah, to be honest, it is just writing about them, but it's definitely a case of I just used to write about British athletes. I did like a feature series where I just interviewed them on a poxy little blog, basically website, which is called Views from the Concourse. And I just kind of liked writing, learning from sort of the best in Britain. Through that, I kind of spoke to a guy called Andy Davis, marathon runner, British marathon runner. I sort of knew him separately, and he's sponsored by New Balance. An athlete that he worked with moved into athlete management and said, "Do you know any sort of English guys that write?" And fortunately, Andy put my name forward, and then some random guy messaged me on Instagram saying, I work for Global Sports Communication. Would you be interested in having a chat? I never saw it because I don't really check my Instagram DMs, but eventually this guy just, for some reason, was persistent and started commenting on my Instagrams. And then I was like, how did I miss this? And then, yeah, so I obviously jumped at that. Originally just wrote sort of really like, how do they train, stuff like that, but got to go and see how it all works, speak to them, and yeah, just leech off everything that they offer, kind of.
That's interesting, man, because this is quite a step forward in the athletics world. The fact that a management company wants to get their athletes' stories out. Often they would sit back and rely on, I guess big media outlets, especially in the running world, to document stuff. But clearly they wanted something a little bit more individual and just tailored towards their guys.
Yeah, I think that is what NN want to do. They just want to tell their athletes' stories. So I think basically if you speak to any of their agency, their marketing guys, they'll just say what they've been really frustrated with in the past is Ethiopian, Kenyan, and Ugandan athletes. No one knows who they are. And I think that's pretty fair to say. And to be honest, like still people in the NN team, a lot of them you probably wouldn't know who they are. But it's about showing that these guys are like characters. They're people with stories and backgrounds, and trying to just engage the public so that when you go and watch a race, and I don't know, either of you might be commentating, but you hear these names and you know their stories, and you actually think, oh, that guy's got a bit of banter. That guy's that his story, he came from nothing, or he came from loads, and he's had so many setbacks, and you just kind of get involved. And I think with any of this, it's storytelling. I think we could be interested in like Tiddlywinks or the most tin pot sport, but if we know the guys and the characters behind it, then we can really engage in that sport. They're really passionate about putting that forward in terms of video content. Obviously, part of it is the written side of it, and I'm really grateful they do that. But they would like to engage with as many outlets as possible in terms of, those sports docs that we're kind of seeing in terms of athletics. Hopefully one day we will see like the equivalent in the distance world for that Kenyan group and the others in Ethiopia and Uganda.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been great to kind of see NN kind of dominate on social media over the past few years, kind of pushing for that. Just on kind of some of those maybe more unknown athletes, is there anyone that you see as kind of an up and comer, maybe that we don't know even?
Yeah, so he's probably not in the public consciousness that much, but he did race in the Olympics the other day. And that's a guy called Daniel Matejko. I can talk about a couple of others as well, but Daniel basically has been a half marathon star for a couple of years or 3 years. He's run sort of consistently 58 minutes, 20 to 58.50. I think he's actually got the record for the most amount of 58 performances of any athlete of all time. But when I was out in Kenya, he'd basically just bombed out of the London Marathon. He got to, that tunnel where suddenly all the elite athletes suddenly disappeared, and then there was Emil Caress coming out the other side. Yeah. Well, that was basically Daniel stepped off at that point. And he said, I was sort of sitting to him in a garden. He said he was going for the 10,000 meters, and it was 5 weeks later. He was actually planning on doing night of the 10,000, so it was going to be him and Chilimo. But then Kenya made it the trials that you had to go and do the pre-classic. So that's like pretty annoying, because I think it would have been really cool to see that matchup. He ended up going to the pre-classic and running 26:50, and off basically 4 weeks of specific training, or 3 weeks. I came down and I watched him at the track, and they were just like smashing out 400s, and it looked just clueless. It looked desperate. It looked like they were like, oh, we've done marathon training for 15 weeks. Now we're just going to see what we can do in terms of speed. And I thought it was the maddest thing for him to try and go and get a 10,000 meter standard. And then he ended up winning the Kenyan trials. He obviously didn't. He was in the leading pack, ended up finishing about 12th. Yeah. But that's an example of a guy that you don't really know, but actually has that kind of like really interesting story behind him.
Yeah, and obviously it was an electric race. Saturday night ran 26:50 as well. But that's fascinating. And he is in the group with Kipchoge. So was he doing the classic Patrick Sang marathon build?
Yeah. So yeah, his whole point was trying to qualify for the marathon for Team Kenya. He was pretty convinced that he was going to do that. And then obviously bombing out of London, you couldn't do that. But yeah, he trains. So the first time that I saw him, he was just purely a half marathon guy. And for Patrick Sang, that actually means something quite a lot different to the marathon. They do sort of really kind of change the training a little bit. So most of that whole group is marathon, or you've got, well, actually, to be honest, you've got 800 guys all the way up to the marathon. But he was kind of training by himself. So they do their long, speedy stuff. And Daniel would just be set off completely by himself. And then he'd actually be caught by the marathon guys at some point, which I thought was quite interesting. So sort of, I think if with the NN guys, one thing that you'll kind of see if you go out and see them, or they ever kind of show it, is they basically have no respect for anybody on some of those long runs. Like I've seen, they do a 40k long run, they set them off at paces. So like Daniel was getting set off like 2 or 3 minutes ahead. They actually had Jeffrey Karui. Do you remember him? Like London, well, he won the world champs in London and Boston a couple of times, but he just got spat out. They literally just, it's like a war of attrition. They start steady, and then they just, have no respect for anyone, and will just wind it up, and you'll get sort of 12 guys at the start and then 4 guys at the end. And that's normally a pretty good indicator of who's in some form or who's not. I've seen like Jeffrey Cameron get absolutely spat out of those groups, and like probably shouldn't be saying this because they probably didn't want us to see it, but it's quite cool how the very best in the world, they don't race each other, but they also, they're not just going to take it easy just because someone's having a bad day.
Their Sundays or their long run days are not a social, relaxed affair like the rest of the world.
It's not a run club, is it?
Yeah, they're not. It's not a Sunday plug, put it like that. But,
yeah,
and it's actually it's actually on Thursday as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I think we had Cathal Dennehy on the podcast previously to speak about when he kind of went and observed Kipchoge. How recently have you been out there? Have you seen Kipchoge kind of get challenged on some of these runs? Because I know when we spoke to him, we asked him the same thing, and back then, obviously Kipchoge was a bit of a different beast, and he said, every time Kipchoge was always last man standing, beating everyone and everything. But what's it like now?
Yeah, I still think he leads the pack, to be honest. And so in terms of the marathon guys they've got in the group, they've got a guy called Laban Karir who's run about 2:05. Kaan Keegan Özbilen, he's a Turkish guy. He won Eurocross a few years ago. He's run about 2:04. Philemon Rono 2:05. They've got a few sort of 10k guys, half marathon guys that can step up. So like Matejko would run in that group. A guy called Hilary Chepkwony, who's actually coming over to do the Antrim half. So that'll be someone to look out for. He'll probably go for like 58 something. I mean, he has quite a lot of banter with Daniel Matejko about breaking Daniel's course record at Antrim. But yeah, I would say Kipchoge's in. I don't know, he's in quite a testy mood, if I'm being brutally honest, in terms of the first time that I went out was in 2022. And I think at that point, he kind of thought that his legacy was already written and that it would stand the test of time, if you get what I mean. But I think the last year where sort of we saw Kelvin Kiptum emerge and the attention has kind of gone elsewhere a little bit. And Eliud, I feel like part of him feels that it's a little bit disrespectful to kind of sleep on him in that way. And he's still, and also I think we've got to bear in mind that I know we saw him sort of do quite badly in Tokyo. I think he would admit he came 10th, he ran 2:06.50. But he had a lot of challenges at that point. I mean, when we talk about the like death threats on his family, and I think just the pressure, he basically has gone from being a national hero in Kenya to people on Facebook and Instagram just giving him loads of abuse and basically saying, oh, you should be matching up with Kiptum in every race. And it's kind of just a little bit disrespectful to sort of what we might consider the greatest marathon runner of all time, that he kind of has to answer to this at the last stage of his career. But I think sort of going back to your question, I think it's kind of invigorated him at this point. So when we spoke to him in May of this year, he was a little bit angry, a little bit frosty with journalists, if I'm being like honest, because they're the same guys that have kind of said, oh, this is towards the end of your career. They're kind of the same guys that are saying the baton's passed. But he's still the guy that is there at the end on those 40K long runs where they're doing sort of 500 meters of elevation. He's still there that's just stepping, getting his Morton drink, getting in the car, going home. He's still there at the track. The thing is, they all do it all very regularly at the track. So there'll be no like guy that's just like off the front. They do it as like an 8-man unit and they just take it. But he always looks comfortable. He's always marshalling them. I think, to be honest, he's still got one last chance at an Olympic gold. I kind of want to see it happen. And I also kind of respect Kipchoge for not being that like manicured thing that we've seen for the last 10 years and actually being human, being a bit testy, being a bit like frosty. I think that makes him like, human. And that's quite nice to see.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. And it's funny hearing you talk about it then. We're like, and I think even, definitely me and Lum fall victim of this sometimes. Like, you love an athlete when they're dominating up to a certain point, and then after a while you're like, okay, someone else's turn. I'm gonna root for the underdog. And I just feel like that is culture, isn't it? It's why everyone hates Man United. But and obviously that Bekele and Kipchoge matchup, mate. We'll preview the marathon in just a little bit, but I just want to talk about, you mentioned the dynamic on the long runs, about Patrick Sang and his magic. And you mentioned he's working with people from 800 up to the marathon. He's working with Kipyegon, who is just a 1500 star that we've never seen before, and her 5K prowess as well. Like, how is one guy managing so many high caliber athletes? This is not a group where he's got one big name and the rest of them are kind of training partners. He has got so many stars.
Yeah, well, I think first thing to say about that is he's got a lot of support in terms of other coaches within that group. So he's got Richard Metto, who I believe won World Cross at some point. You might have to fact check me on that, but I think he has. He's got Brimin Kipruto. So obviously world and Olympic steeplechase champion. He's also got Augustine Choge, who we used to kind of see battle against Farah back in sort of the early 2010s. He won World Indoors. So he has got people who can kind of manage those individual groups during a training session. But to be honest, he's still really on it with all of them. He has a pretty formulaic for even if you're an 800 meter guy, your training will be different. Obviously, you're not going to be smashing out massive interval sessions with really long volume, but the basics and the fundamentals are quite similar. So, for example, in that group, you got Wycliffe Kinyamal, who I think he ran 142 this summer. Well, he opened his season in 143, and I think like 10 days, 20 days before that, he was doing a 40K long run with the marathon guys. And then you've also got Faith, who has built up to she does do 40K occasionally, which is mad for obviously from 1500 runner, but she is kind of a little bit bulletproof, I think. But yeah, so Sang kind of sees the value in the strength. But then if you actually ask him what his training philosophy is, he would say, well, actually what he said, the only coach that has a similar training philosophy is Gert Ingebrigtsen. So he actually kind of regards his training as very similar. So actually, when you go and watch it, you'll actually see that, yeah, they're doing a lot of threshold stuff. They're not doing like double sessions, but they're doing a lot of it is just very controlled threshold work. And he kind of sees his view is that he was doing this before everyone else was. And then he'll have very specific, periodization where he'll really dial in on the speed and the specifics. But generally, it's pretty consistent. It's about making those runners bulletproof in terms of strength, and then trusting that they've still got the speed. And then there's also like the intangibles that we don't even talk about, but that mindset, he's massive on the mindset of not letting external things interfere with your training. So when you actually, the camp itself, like there's certain rules that everyone abides by. So they always train first thing in the morning, and they won't go on the phone until like 11 o'clock in the morning. So even when they wake up, they're not like checking Instagram. They're going to, everything's very formulaic, and everything is so pure and no distractions whatsoever. And I think it's very simple. I think we often like really overcomplicate things, but if you ever go there, you actually realize that it's not that complicated. They just do a lot of hard stuff all the time really well. They recover from it really. They like meticulous about how they recover from it, and they do the fundamentals just really well.
And those rules, did Sang come up with those, or was that?
Yeah, so Sang actually, so there are rules in camp, but because basically Sang doesn't live with all the others. So Sang lives in a nice little house in Eldoret, and all other sort of 20 to 30 athletes live in sort of a compound where they all self-regulate each other. And Sang's quite big on encouraging them to have a bit of accountability in terms of those rules and how they talk to each other, how they just instill like excellence. So you often see like quite cool interactions between senior and junior athletes, and yeah, they generally come up with those rules themselves. A lot of them are quite cliched. You'll see a lot of sort of really the sort of, yeah, you'll see a lot of Nike slogans all around, but I think they genuinely do just kind of believe in them a little bit. I'm trying to come up with an example, but I can't really think of one to the top of my head, but there's sort of all the cliches that, for example, Eliud saying passion isn't a chance, it's a choice. You'll see that emblazoned all over the camp, but they do kind of repeat that. And when you actually speak to the athletes, it's not just kind of a cliche. They kind of really see it as fundamental to the way they train.
I'm intrigued to, obviously you've spent time in the camp as well, and you mentioned junior to senior, that kind of relationship, the dynamic when people potentially aren't running as well. How does that look from the outside?
Yeah, well, I've asked Sang about that before. Like, what happens when people aren't running well? In terms of, you've obviously got like absolute high flyers, but I think the reality is that they really measure their ups and downs really well. So if an athlete has a really bad race, they're just encouraged not to believe that they're suddenly like a worse athlete. They just had a bad day. And at the same time, when Eliud wins like the biggest competitions, he wins the Olympics, he's encouraged just to say, well, just to focus on the process that he had before and what led up to that. And so, and in the camp, fundamentally, they're treated the same. So other rules that are there is they've got to do the cooking, the cleaning. So genuinely, you will see if you catch him at the right time, you'll see Eliud Kipchoge cleaning the box, Faith Kipyegon going in there with like scrubbing them genuinely, and that still does happen. There are slight differences. So everyone shares a room, bar 3 athletes, and the 3 athletes are Eliud Kipchoge, Jeffrey Cameron, and Faith Kipyegon. But I mean, we're talking like 2.5 meters by 2 meters. They're not in like a lap of luxury just because they got their own room. But they do, that is their sole little prize for being the best in the world. But yeah, they're generally all doing completely the same stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of chat about some of these races coming up then, because obviously those athletes you mentioned. Well, maybe we'll start with Faith and her chances in the 5K. What are your thoughts on that? As someone who kind of goes, do you kind of automatically become kind of this fan of the group? If you like it, would you say you're kind of an NN fan?
I'm definitely a Faith fan, I think.
Yeah.
She's just down to earth, and she will say there's no filter really on her. Basically, her and Sifan Hassan are very similar. They just shoot from the hip, and others are more sort of guarded a little bit. But yeah, I saw Faith in like May, and to be honest, I was writing an article for Athletics Weekly, and the whole article was going to be about how the gap had closed in terms of her to Good After Sagai to everyone else. Because in literally early May, she was going around the track and you could like visibly see the fact that she was limping. I'd seen her do a threshold session the year before. She was probably 6 seconds, 7 seconds down per kilometer on it. And after 7 reps, she stepped off to the side and looked like she was retching into a bush. And to be honest, at the time, I was like, they really don't want us to see this, because they wouldn't want the world knowing that she's not in a good place. So obviously she then pulled out of pre, but then she turned up at the Kenyan trials and beat Beatrice Chebet at altitude running. What did she run, like 14:56 or I can't remember what it was, but and she did it all in the last 600 meters. And I think if you're going to talk about like unbeatable athletes at the Olympics, you've got to put Faith Kipyegon in that equation, especially in the 1500. But I think Beatrice Chebet was the leading 5,000 meter runner, and she got absolutely schooled by Faith Kipyegon in the Kenyan trials. So I don't know. To me, she will kind of lead the way. And also, she's quite, a lot of athletes say they don't focus on the competition, and they just say it's all about the process, and you don't actually really believe them. Like, I don't believe it a lot of the time. Like, of course Josh Kerr is thinking about Jakob Ingebrigtsen. Like, they're obviously thinking about each other. But with Faith, I genuinely get the impression that she isn't thinking about her competitors. She's thinking, if I'm in the best shape that I'm possibly in, no one in the world can kind of keep up with me. I think that's her attitude, and I think she has somehow, despite having genuine, I think, injuries over the last 3 or 4 months, she's got herself in a position where she can win 2 Olympic golds for the first time, to be the person that wins the woman who wins 1,500 and 5,000 at Olympics.
She certainly looks like that when she's racing, man. I mean, the amount of time she's had like women on her shoulder, like trying to go with her when she's running these world records and, crazy fast times, she's completely unfazed. And just, I thought Jess Holt was threatening her a little bit. It was in Paris, and yeah, she just, just keeps going. I think, yeah, there's locks for the Olympics. Mondo's obviously won, and then you start to look around and you're like, Jesus, Grant Holloway and Kipyegon, like they're just, so I think that's fair. So there's your kind of women's 5,000 and 1,500 prediction, I guess. And then we were talking about Kipchoge a little bit, that matchup as well with Bekele, and the other Kenyans that we're going to see in the marathon, a week yesterday. But yeah, I mean, it would be quite special if he gets 3 Olympic golds. I mean, that would put him as the greatest marathon runner of all time, wouldn't it? If he's not already.
Yeah, definitely. I think his greatest challenge probably comes. The one person that he always sounds like he's got a lot of respect for is Kenenisa Bekele. He actually says, I've heard him say before, he bettered me on the track. Basically, he he couldn't beat Bekele, bar that 2003. He regards him as a much better athlete on the track than him, which is obviously fair enough by the standards. But the bar Bekele, who he's got a massive amount of respect for, I kind of feel like he feels that he can kind of handle the rest of the competition a little bit. Although there is one kind of wild card in that marathon, I kind of feel. Eliud Kipchoge has actually never beaten Benson Kipruto. They've raced 3 times, and Benson's occasionally had a bad day. And even when he has a bad day, Eliud seems to have a worse day. So, for example, when Eliud came 8th at the London Marathon, Benson Kipruto was 7th. When Eliud had a bad day at Boston, Benson won, and then Benson won again in Tokyo again. So it's kind of like that's his kind of Achilles heel. And when I asked, when someone else actually asked him about Benson, it was kind of a little bit frosty, if I'm being brutally honest. They said, "Are you 2 friends?" And he said, "What's your definition of a friend?" Which I quite like, to be honest. But I'm not saying I think Eliud will beat him. I hope he does. But there's no athlete basically in the world where he's got a losing record against him. But the one that he does is Benson Kipruto. Actually, I think another one is strangely that what's the Moroccan that used to be in the NCAA? Zouair Talbi, because they've raced once, or
Mate, you've got stellar knowledge, to be fair.
I've just got
you're trying to mention here.
Boring marathon knowledge. And the other one is probably big threat is Alexander Mutiso Munyao, who obviously Tamarat Tola.
Yeah,
I think we kind of sleep on him a little bit, but he has proved himself in championship races like this. I think it's worth mentioning that, I don't know if you talked about it at all, but that Paris course is like absolutely bonkers.
I was going to say, have they, obviously Kipchoge, from what I've read, you've pushed out lots of other journalists as well. The marathon build, that 16-week build, is very meticulous and it doesn't really change. Obviously, when he was doing Boston, everyone's like, is he going to train for the hills? Blah, blah, blah. We saw how Boston went. Has that kind of marathon build changed pre-Paris?
Well, I asked him that directly. I said, are you going to change? Because, Tokyo is the flattest of any major marathon. And you can't train for Tokyo like you train for the Olympics. So I said, are you going to change your training? And I think he was a bit fed up at that point, but he was like, the training plan doesn't change at all. And then I asked Patrick Sang about it, and he basically said, well, what did Eliud say? Because he basically wasn't going to say anything about their game plan unless Eliud had said it. So he then gave me a bit of a retreat, which was, he said, the fundamentals don't change, but the specifics do. It's very clear they've changed their game plan for the Paris Olympics, but he's not going to tell anyone. And then I actually asked one of his teammates, who obviously didn't have any of the scripts whatsoever, hadn't been told what to say, and just said, yeah, the game plan will change. So, but to be honest, like the way that they train on their 40-kilometer long run, they have 500 meters of elevation anyway. Like they do certain routes where they're brutal. They won't have, I think the Paris thing, the one that's slightly different is, yes, there's 500 odd meters or 460 meters of elevation or something, but it's all in like 2 major climbs. It's like a Tour de France. It's like going up the Alpe d'Huez or the Tourmalet. It's like absolutely brutal. And I actually think, as a punter watching it, you got no idea what's going to happen, because we don't see any races where they go up 13.5% inclines. You might get an absolute curveball of some guy who's just used to pounding up mountains. And I think that's one thing that you notice about the British guys. They've done really specific stuff in terms of that elevation of like Phil and Emil. They seem to have really dialed in on, I can't remember exactly how many meters of elevation they're getting each week, but they're getting a lot. But yeah, in short, I think Eliud and the others in that group, so Khan Keegan, Osberlin, he's in the Olympic marathon too. Yeah, they'll change their training slightly, but also they already do a lot of those hills anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad they have changed the game plan, because I think it would be a bit risky of them not to. So yes, it's interesting you mention it because I think he's always kind of given off the impression that will never change and kind of keeps his shield up. But I do think it adds to that allure of Kipchoge, doesn't it? I think that's why he kind of has his fans and then also has people who want to see him shot down. You know.
Yeah, I also think that that's one of their greatest successes is to an extent
Mm.
that game plan doesn't change. So in a way, he's kind of talking true. I think the one thing that we see is we see Eliud Kipchoge winning so many of these major marathons, but there are other people in those groups that aren't necessarily winning. Eliud's kind of been the one that can stand the test of time. And the reality is that he's just had 10 years, or sorry, not even 10, 20 years now of just compounded training, the same fundamentals year on year. And his body has just adapted to just be this complete machine in a marathon build up. But yeah, so he trusts that as long as, yeah, they'll change little specifics, but the fundamentals that they do is what gets them like 99% of the way forward anyway. And I think sometimes maybe we like overcomplicate marathon builds or try and get really specific. And if Patrick Sang and Eliud Kipchoge aren't doing that, you kind of, and I genuinely believe they're not doing it that much, then that kind of tells you a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, one of the questions I just want to sort of finish up with is, do you feel like a European could survive that? Not the training, because I'm sure, they're doing something similar, like you take someone like Emil, but could a European or a Western athlete live in that culture? That whole compound and on top of 20 other high profile athletes. I suspect it would be very, very testing for a lot of people. No, even if
Yeah.
you're a 204 guy, let's say.
Yeah. With the reality is that like even a lot of the like Africans can't necessarily handle it. Like Abdi Nagai, for example, he trained in that group up until 2020 and just came to a point where like the simplicity of it, you do like the exact same thing basically every day. You eat the same food, you go to bed at the same time, you wake up. And actually like Abdi basically kind of wanted to have another life outside it as well. And he actually went away, had a lot. And also because they are training as a whole group, there's not necessarily like the individualized focus unless you're like Eliud or Faith, or there's a lot which are kind of just training as the group. So if you're like the next one down, like Abdi, then you really want to take that next step. You might feel that you need the real specific stuff. Could like other Europeans, obviously Joshua Cheptegei trained there as well for 3 months, but then he actually decided that he wanted to prove. So a lot of previously a lot of Ugandans have gone and trained. So Stephen Kiprotich was training in that group when he won the Olympic men's marathon. But Joshua basically wanted to show that Ugandans didn't need to leave Uganda to kind of show that they could compete on the global level. He was always about that sort of like legacy. So different things for different people. I know that certain British guys, there's obviously Mark Scott's part of that NN group. And I think Mark has previously asked to join in Kaptagat. But Sang's kind of like it's all or nothing. Like you can't just go and do a 12-week build or 6-week build. You've got to kind of be all in. You've got to really commit to the camp. And that is a lot to commit to if you're a Western athlete. Of course you can. I mean, we saw obviously the Robertsons, they did it. Not obviously, it is entirely possible for a European athlete to go out there and do that. And I think if there was one that was going to do that and would probably thrive, I think it's probably Emil, if we're being brutally honest. But yeah, it's entirely possible. But the challenge isn't just the training, it's also the complete dedication, like 100% dedication all the time. And that's a lot.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And it's what gives them their strength, isn't it? But just before we finish up, then George, it's been great to chat to you about the NN guys, guys and girls. But are there any kind of other events or other athletes maybe that aren't kind of around those groups that you're looking forward to over the next kind of week or so?
Yeah, well, there's one other guy from that group which I think could be a bit of a curveball in the 5,000. He won the Kenyan trials. I don't know if you remember years ago, he was a 1,500 meter runner. he broke the world under 20 record in 2014. He's a guy called Ronald Quemoy. Don't know if you remember him, but yeah, he's kind of snuck up and he's done 2 races. He ran like 13:02 in China, which obviously isn't a lot in world standards nowadays. But I think just the way that he beat like Edwin Kurgat and the rest of the Kenyan opposition, that makes him a bit of a curveball in the 5,000. But then again, I said the same thing for Matejko and he ended up finishing 9th or 10th. So. But yeah, I think for me, I think the 800 is going to be amazing. I'm kind of going to secretly like root for like Wycliffe Kinyamal, obviously the Brits. Outside pick, I think Bryce Hopper would be could win that. But yeah, I have no real specific expertise on those events. Not that I do on the marathon either. But yeah, I would love to see.
That's super, man. And I just wanted to say, I don't know if you've been, you're in the know or you've been able to kind of get out to see Hassan train, but the one kind of like who looks after her, and obviously we know is Roby's her coach and stuff, but does she do everything on her own? Does she ever come over to camps? And two, then like, do you think this triple that she's about to do? I guess we'll find out in a few nights whether she can pull the 5,000 off. What are her chances?
Yeah, I mean, it's nuts, isn't it? I think we all knew that she wasn't going to do all 4. I don't know why that was going around, because like she was just entered in all 4 because she could do. But yeah, I mean, she trains by herself in Park City, Utah. She's been based there for like 2 or 3 years. I think she does occasionally go to Ethiopia, but it is basically exclusively just by herself there. She's got a nice little setup. Could she do it in terms of? I think she could medal in probably all of them. Personally, we spoke to her a couple of days ago when she announced it, and I was like, "Are you willing to sacrifice winning gold in one for the sake of giving it a go in all 3?" And I think ultimately, yeah, her answer was like, yeah, she is willing to try and show whether it's possible or not. Like, I think Hassan needs like new things to excite her. Like, and she's got bored of just global golds. That doesn't kind of mean enough. It's like the challenge of, can I withstand 2 5Ks, a 10K, and what is that? 62K running or whatever.
Yeah, that's literally it. Yeah, it's crazy how much she's going to do.
Yeah, she's got.
I would just love to know what. Sorry, I was just saying. I would just love to know what training she does in between as well, because I can't imagine she just sat around in between these rounds either. So
yeah, I think she's got 3 days. That's the most she's got break in this. I think the challenge is going to be that Friday night, and then Friday night 10,000 meters, and then 36 hours later a marathon. And then we got to be brutally honest, that women's marathon field is absolutely nuts in terms of like, that's a hard field to beat, even if you're like the very best in the world. So like, I half fancy Paris Jepchirchir in that one, but Helena Beery, any of them, like, yeah. But to be honest, as like track fans or athletics fans generally, like, we need to see people like Sifan Hassan do crazy triples like that. That is so much more exciting than just the safe choice and just doing the marathon. What does that mean? Like, she's the best marathon runner in the world, but what's actually going to teach us stuff is, can the body withstand, like, are humans capable of doing challenges like that, and what can we learn from it? I think that's what's exciting.
Yep. Look, in 30 years time we could be like the swimming, and we could have loads of Hassans doing loads of different events.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, George, look, we'll end it there, but thanks so much for coming on the pod, mate.
No, really appreciate it, guys, and yeah, thanks for having me.